Thank you, everyone, for hanging in there. We got a couple of good stories for you now. So the first instance of this PFAS contamination happened in my state, in my town next door, where we detected PFAS at really high levels at a water well that was shut down in 2014 that was put for some reason in the middle of an airstrip on an Air Force base. I don't know why they did that. They thought that was a good idea. So that well was shut down, the biggest supply well on the seacoast of New Hampshire. We then started to unravel this situation. And as Representative Kildee said, there are over 400 bases just like ours in Pease, the Pease Air Force Base in Portsmouth across the country. So we're beginning to unravel this situation. And we have done a lot of work in passing some important legislation in the state of New Hampshire. We have really done some work trying to get enforceable drinking water standards both on the state level and the national level with many of our partners you heard from today. And that involves moving people along with us. And as Representative Kildee said, you don't always make it on the first try. But important steps are taken in bringing more people along. You heard Representative Kildee say that some of the people that should have been more supportive were then more supportive after that NDAA failed. So there's a variety of ways we do that. We do that with our partners like our Representative Ro-Khanna and Representative Kildee. We do that with inspiring, someone else, I think it was Rep. Kildee, talked about moving people as well. So we formed an organization called New Hampshire Safe Water Alliance, and I'll ask you guys to all go on Facebook. I know Facebook's a little old for you guys, but we have a group on Facebook called New Hampshire Safe Water Alliance where we work together to form coalitions to inform people, to motivate people, to inspire people to get involved. Through that process of that work and through the process of Pease Air Force Base, I'm involved with restoring the aquifer. I met this wonderful woman, Doris Brock. And Doris Brock is the wife of a veteran who has died, an Air National Guard worker who was at Pease. And so part of the effort of bringing people along is to have these people's stories be raised so they can have a personal connection with what is actually going on and how it impacts the people. So I'd like to bring Doris up to to present her story to you. And this is part of our effort to help people understand how impactful and how important and serious the situation is across the nation. Thank you very much, Doris Brock.
Thank you, Mindi. I can use the handheld.
Okay, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you, Mindi.
Thank you, Mindi. And I also want to thank the Less Cancer Organization for inviting me to share my story with you. It really does impact everybody. And I'm going to be telling you about the military installations. And I have a personal connection to the military installation because my husband was in the Air National Guard. And when you talk about the Air National Guard, you think it's just a weekend warrior kind of thing where they only do their 1 week in a month and 2 weeks of active duty a year. My husband worked at Pease Air Force Base for 35 years. 7 days a week. He worked there as a full-time guardsman, and it was a wonderful life. Military life is really, a wonderful thing. We're a big family. We all, get together. It's just when this came about, and I want to talk a little bit about how this came about. When he retired in 2005. I was still working, and several years later, he was diagnosed with stage 4 bladder cancer, and it affected his prostate as well. And at the time that we got this diagnosis, we were told that he had 3 to 5 years to live. It was at that point that I left my employment and became his full-time caregiver. And you don't think about, what would cause that type of cancer. His surgeon, when we met with him, asked him if he had ever gone to Vietnam. And we thought it was a funny question. But what he said to us was, and that was the thing that actually clicked in my mind, was that, why are you asking this question? He said that his cancer was very consistent with what he had seen in those people who served in Vietnam and had been exposed to Agent Orange. So when that clicked, you start doing a little bit of research, and you find out that there's more people out there that are affected, through their military service. The National Guard, has been the almost active duty Air Force, Army, Marines since 9/11. There were a lot of base closures back in 1990, and so the Air Guard actually took over, or all of the Guard units. So they became the deployable units. So in looking back at this, while my husband was ill, we had friends, that contacted us and said, did you know that so-and-so had this cancer? Did you know that so-and-so had this cancer? And the bottom line of that is that at that particular point in time, I had a list of 62 names that were our friends, and 39 had died from cancers, many before the age of 65, which is really a very high number, and it's just our friends. So I just, and then I became the caregiver, didn't really do a lot with it. He passed away in June of 2017. I actually didn't do anything with that for quite some time. But the numbers, there were people who were still getting in touch with me during that year after he passed, and the numbers started climbing. And if you ever wanted to get the attention of any military installation, do an interview with media. That works every time. So I did this interview, and I talked about this, and only my personal story, and described the numbers. And our Air National Guard actually got wind of it, and so did our delegates, and they wanted to do something about that. It took 4 months for them, to pull something together, and we did create the Peas Health Work Group. And this Peas Health Work Group, what they were planning on doing, or what we tried to do, is talk about prevention, talk about alerting the military that there is a possibility that they were exposed to toxins in their workplace. And the reason why I did that was because I had read about the PFAS on the seacoast. I moved away. I live 3 hours north in the North Country, so I don't pay attention to any of that, in the lower part of New Hampshire. But I read that, and I got mad. And the reason why I got mad was because I kept on talking about the firefighting foam. And in the case of the military, you're talking, people who've been exposed to very, very volatile toxins. My husband, in the start of his career, worked with jet fuels and petroleum products, other petroleum products. Then he went to aircraft maintenance, and so there were solvents, paint strippers, and a lot of other things. And at that time, the military never had a hazardous material program until the late 1980s, prior to the closure of Pease Air Force Base. So when you look at that and you think back of these men and women who washed aircraft without any proper protective equipment, these people bathed in jet fuels, bathed in everything else. And then we had the firefighting foam on top of that, and they drank the coffee. They made coffee every day. And I had an old-timer, he's in his 70s, and he came to me, he goes, well, we never drank the water. He goes, we knew not to. And I said, did you drink coffee? He goes, several pots a day. What water did you use? So it was really just kind of, it's funny but not funny, when that happens. So we did have this health work group, and we did get people together. The health work group actually thinks that they've done what they set out to do. Because first, they can't be legislatively involved because they are a component of the Air Force. But we did inform the retirees and anybody that we could get a hold of, about how to speak to your doctor. Where can you get the material, to tell your doctor what you've been exposed to. Because, if you go see a doctor and they tell you, they say, what's wrong with you? And they develop a cancer, and you don't tell them that you worked in the military for so many years. And so we wanted to educate them on how to do that. So that did happen. And then 2 weeks ago, we were fortunate enough to get a study. And I will say that when I first heard about the study, I was not happy. And the reason for that is that the U.S. Air Force School of Aerospace Medicine is going to do a mortality study. And I really wanted to impact the people, that I work with. These people are like your grandfathers, and, they're my best friends. So when they talked about doing this mortality study, I finally calmed down, and I realized that this is the best we can have today, but I want to move it forward, to look at doing a cancer incidence study. When I told you about the 62 cancers, The cancers that these people had are all organ cancers, with some blood cancers. But they're pancreatic, bladder, liver, kidney, and that to me is just an unusually high number of cancers in one particular area. So we have that going on. I'm excited about this study. Mindy's going to help me move forward, so that we can get this other study. And then the Veterans Administration is my other. I'm working to try to get the Veterans Administration to look at, our military members, for those that served. And I realize that you have to have had, a number of years in order to qualify for some of that. I've been fighting the Veterans Administration for the last 5 years, and 3 weeks ago, I got my denial. And so I'm continuing the process. And the denial is, I can't prove service connection, and he didn't die within a year of his retirement. And it's just, yeah. Oh, and my first one was the best excuse is, and it's not tuberculosis. And it's like, okay. So it's just, it's a battle, to fight. I feel that if we can just help these people, and get them to tell their doctors what they were exposed to, that we'll be so much better off. Fighting the Veterans Administration is a whole other, topic. And so I'll continue that fight. And my reason for doing that is because Camp Lejeune is a Marine base. It took 35 years of studies for Camp Lejeune to get presumptive disease, to apply for disability based on presumption. And so when I look at the definition of presumptive, it's presumed because of a lack of information. And that's why I'm fighting, to get them, the disability that they deserve. So that's really my story. And, I just wanted to share that with all of you. And for all of you, the high school students here, I was trying to think of how I could connect this to you, besides being grandparents. And that year that I didn't do anything, was a big mistake. But it gave me time to regroup after my husband passed away. And getting mad and actually getting involved, in your community and with other people, is the best thing that you can do. And I'm not sorry that I got involved.
Neither are we.
Thank you.